His hands were already becoming the stuff of legend. By the end of the 2003 season, Fitzgerald had 92 catches for 1,672 yards and 22 touchdowns.
Too much mud, sipping on drink the reaper, nigga. Scroll through pictures of myself, gotta face my demons, nigga. If no one else, I'ma do it myself, I plan to leave it, nigga. Front on, I'm gon' lead on my own. Hustling, ballin', got it right now, I'm strong.
Meet the star receiver who physically couldn't drop a pass. Yo, what it do is your boy Kavis TV, man. We back with another video, man. In today's video, as you see by the title, we got Larry Fitzgerald, man. He just got his Hall of Fame jacket too, so he is a Hall of Famer. But please, we already knew that, but before he even got the jacket, he ain't dropped no passes. And this with different quarterbacks of each of his season, because Arizona couldn't keep a quarterback for nothing. But if you're new to the channel, man, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, comment what video you want to see next. And we're going to get into it. Let's go.
Larry Fitzgerald finished his career with 1,432 receptions and only 29 drops. That's a drop rate of under 2%. In fact, he recorded more tackles than drops. Fitzgerald wasn't the fastest or strongest player on the field, but in every measurable way that matters, he was elite. He finished his career second all-time in receiving yards with 17,492, second all-time in receptions with 1,432. And he did it all while catching passes from 21 different starting quarterbacks across 17 seasons. So, how does a receiver, under those circumstances, become a star who basically never dropped a pass? And where does Larry Fitzgerald truly rank among the all-time greats? To answer that, we need to go back to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it all began. His father, Larry Fitzgerald Sr., was a respected sports writer and broadcaster, which meant Larry wasn't learning the game from highlight reels on TV. Instead, he was actually in locker rooms and in press boxes, soaking up everything. But the real turning point came when he landed a dream job for an up-and-coming football player. Ball boy for the Minnesota Vikings. At just 14 years old, Larry was standing shoulder to shoulder with his idols. He got to watch quarterback Warren Moon's professionalism, Chris Carter's precision as a route runner, and Robert Smith's discipline. But there was one player who stood out more to him than anyone else, Randy Moss. To young Larry, seeing the way Moss floated down the field, snatched jump balls over helpless defenders, and turned every Sunday into a showcase was incredible.
That's crazy. That's a crazy story. Like, imagine working at the Minnesota. You a ball boy. You seen your idols doing all this. Man, you get to the NFL, bro. You doing this. That's wow, bro. That's wow.
Moss became his idol, the very player he patterned his dreams after. And Moss, instead of brushing off the quiet ball boy, embraced him, offering advice, encouragement, and even trust. On Larry's prom night, after finally working up the courage to ask, Moss handed Larry the keys to his BMW. And Larry drove his date in his hero's car and returned it without a scratch. And while Moss was becoming a legend in the NFL, at the Academy of Holy Angels, Fitzgerald was carving out a legend of his own. And it wasn't because he was overwhelming opponents with blazing speed or sheer size. What made him unforgettable were his hands. As a kid, Larry's grandfather, an optometrist, put him through eye training drills, catching tennis balls with one eye covered, merging two pennies into one through focus, and even tossing footballs in a pitch-black room and catching them by feel. Those exercises gave him elite hand-eye coordination before he was even a teenager. Pretty much if the ball was in the air, it belonged to him. Coaches started testing it in practice, throwing wobblers into double coverage, firing passes behind his back shoulder, lobbing them just out of reach. And time after time, Larry hauled him in. Over his junior and senior seasons, he racked up over 2,100 receiving yards and 34 touchdowns, earning 2 first-team All-State selections and a reputation for the most reliable receiver Minnesota had ever seen. However, Fitzgerald didn't meet NCAA academic requirements coming out of high school, meaning he had to spend a year at Valley Forge Military Academy. And when it was finally time to take his talents to the next level, he decided to commit to the University of Pittsburgh. As a freshman, he didn't need a warm-up period. By his second game, he was putting up 100-plus yards against ranked Texas A&M. Later that season, he hung 105 yards and 3 touchdowns on number 3 Virginia Tech, and closed the year with 159 yards and 2 more scores against rival West Virginia. And when the lights came down on the 2002 Insight Bowl, he delivered again, 88 yards and a touchdown in Pitt's blowout win over Oregon State. By the end of that season, Fitzgerald led the entire Big East in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. But 2003 was the year Larry Fitzgerald really broke the sport. Right from the jump, he opened the season with 123 yards and 3 touchdowns against Kent State. It was clear nobody could stop him. And over the next 3 months, he went on a tear that barely seems real in hindsight. 201 yards against Toledo, 207 yards against Rutgers, touchdowns in every single game until his career finale. An NCAA record 18 straight games with a touchdown catch. Quarterbacks could throw it high, throw it low, behind him, didn't matter. The ball would just stick. His catch radius was absurd. His body control looked like something out of a video game, and his hands were already becoming the stuff of legend. By the end of the 2003 season, Fitzgerald had 92 catches for 1,672 yards and 22 touchdowns. He walked away with a Biletnikoff Award, Walter Camp Award, and unanimous All-American honors.
Jeez.
He wasn't just the best receiver in college football. He was the best player on the field, period. But when the Heisman votes were tallied, Fitzgerald finished as the runner-up to Oklahoma's Jason White, a decision that even years later, many still call one of the biggest snubs in Heisman history. Regardless, Larry was ready for the NFL. The thing was, he'd only played 2 years at Pitt, which should have made him ineligible under the NFL's 3 years out of high school rule. But Larry had left high school early to attend Valley Forge Military Academy, where he essentially spent a postgraduate year before Pitt. That technically allowed him to petition the league for an exemption, and he won. So by the time
it changed, didn't it? It's like you could do 2 years now and go to the NFL, right? I think so. Yeah. I think you could do that. 2 years, you could do two or 3, I think, or something like that. 2, then leave and go to the NFL, or try to go to the NFL type. I think so.
Fitzgerald declared for the 2004 NFL Draft, there wasn't a scout in America who doubted him. He was a can't-miss, franchise-changing receiver. But the scouts nitpicked the usual things. His 40-yard dash wasn't super fast. His athletic profile wasn't the best, though none of that mattered. Because Fitzgerald had something you couldn't measure on a stopwatch. Hands that were almost supernatural. The 2004 draft was absolutely stacked at wideout. Roy Williams, Lee Evans, Michael Clayton, a deep, dangerous class of pass catchers. But in reality, there was Fitzgerald and there was everyone else. The Arizona Cardinals held the number 3 pick, and their head coach was Dennis Green, the very same Dennis Green who was coaching the Vikings when Fitzgerald was a ball boy there. And he didn't hesitate.
Third choice in the 2004 NFL Draft, the Arizona Cardinals select Larry Fitzgerald, wide receiver, University of Pittsburgh.
The Arizona Cardinals were coming off years of irrelevance, desperate for a spark. And from the moment Fitzgerald put on the uniform, you could feel something was different. He made his NFL debut in Week 1 of the 2004 season against the St. Louis Rams. And even though the Cardinals lost, the rookie wasted no time flashing his potential, hauling in 4 catches for 70 yards. Just a few weeks later, in Week 5 against the 49ers, Fitzgerald broke through with his first career touchdown, a 24-yard strike from Josh McCown. Then, on December 19th against the Rams, Fitzgerald became the youngest player in NFL history at just 21 years and 110 days old to record multiple touchdown receptions in a single game. The Cardinals had just found their franchise receiver. Larry finished the season with 59 catches for 7.
And that's just as a rookie, they had found a franchise receiver. That's crazy. As a rookie, you already know. Oh my gosh.
80 yards
Legendary
and
stats.
8 touchdowns in a year where Arizona went just 6-10. But what stood out was the way he carried himself. He studied like a veteran, worked like a pro, and elevated the offense every time the ball came his way. His work ethic was borderline obsessive. Teammates would see him stay after practice to catch hundreds of passes in every awkward position imaginable. One-handed, behind his back, above his head, below his knees, twisting, falling, reaching. He even banned young receivers who trained with him in the offseason from wearing gloves, so they would strengthen their hands the way he did. And that newfound toughness showed from the very first game of the 2005 season, where Fitzgerald made it clear this season was going to be different. 13 catches, 155 yards, and a touchdown in Game 1 against the Giants. And he never slowed down. He strung together 7 different 100-yard receiving games, found the end zone in 10 separate contests, and by the end of the season, he had hauled in 1,409 yards on a league-leading 103 receptions. But he wasn't doing it alone. Across from him was Anquan Boldin, who eclipsed 100 catches and 1,400 yards that year. Together, Fitzgerald and Boldin became only the second wide receiver duo in NFL history to each put up those kinds of numbers in the same season, joining Detroit's Herman Moore and Brett Perryman from a decade earlier. Suddenly, the Arizona Cardinals, a franchise long ignored in highlight reels, had the most electric receiving duo in football. The team stumbled to a 6-10 finish and missed the playoffs, but Fitzgerald's rise couldn't be ignored. He was named to his first Pro Bowl, cementing himself as one of the league's premier playmakers. What made Fitzgerald so interesting was his style of play. He wasn't a burner who simply ran past defenders. He was unguardable in a different way. Quarterbacks could throw the ball into a crowd, and it almost didn't matter. Fitzgerald had this almost supernatural ability to rise above everyone else, extend those enormous hands, and snatch the ball out of the air like it was his all along. And by the mid-2000s, he was starting to turn those flashes of brilliance into week-after-week dominance. 2006, opening day against the 49ers. Fitzgerald erupted for 133 yards on 9 catches, looking every bit like a man ready to take the next step into superstardom. That was until he had his first setback, a hamstring injury in Week 4 that sidelined him for 3 games. However, just 2 weeks after returning, he torched the Minnesota Vikings, the team he grew up watching from the sideline, for a career-high 172 yards on 11 catches. And as the season closed, Fitzgerald found his groove again, scoring 4 touchdowns in his final 5 games. The Cardinals themselves, well, they were still a mess at 5-11, but their future was crystal clear. They had something special in number 11. And by 2007, they finally started to figure things out. With Kurt Warner seizing the full-time starting job and Anquan Boldin lining up opposite Fitzgerald, Arizona had quietly assembled one of the most lethal passing offenses in football. Fitzgerald ended that season with 100 catches for 1,409 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was named to his second Pro Bowl and earned a reputation as having the best hands in football. So people began calling him Sticky Fingers. And following the season, he received an, at the time, massive 4-year, $40 million extension. And for good reason. He was the cornerstone of a franchise that had spent decades searching for an identity. The Cardinals were a franchise long written off as irrelevant. They hadn't even hosted a playoff game since 1947. But Larry was set out to change that. And his 2008 regular season was spectacular on its own. 96 catches, 1,431 yards, and a league-leading 12 touchdowns. The Cardinals finished 9-7, barely sneaking into the postseason, their first appearance there in nearly a decade. And when his first playoffs rolled around, Fitz became a new monster. In the wild card against Atlanta, he gave the world a preview with 6 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. Then came Carolina, where he completely took over. 8 catches, 166 yards, and a touchdown in a 33-13 blowout. But the NFC Championship against the Eagles is where Fitzgerald truly ascended. On the biggest stage in franchise history, he tied an NFL record with 3 touchdown catches in the first half. And by halftime, Philly's defense had no answers. Fitzgerald finished with 152 yards to go along with his trio of TDs as he carried Arizona to their first ever Super Bowl appearance, Super Bowl 43. They were facing the mighty Pittsburgh Steelers, and with just under 3 minutes left, Kurt Warner looked to the middle of the field, and there was Fitzgerald. Warner fired a slant. Fitzgerald snagged it in stride, split the defense, and sprinted 64 yards for a touchdown. In that moment, destiny felt real. The Cardinals, led by the quiet superstar with the surest hands in football, were about to shock the world. However, Ben Roethlisberger and Santonio Holmes engineered one of the greatest game-winning drives in history, breaking Arizona's heart with a toe-tap touchdown in the corner of the end zone. So the Cardinals fell short. But Fitzgerald's greatness was undeniable. He finished with 7 catches, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the sport's biggest stage.
I remember watching
and by the time the
game.
dust had settled, Fitzgerald had shattered Jerry Rice's long-standing postseason records for most catches, most yards, and most touchdowns. a truly epic run.
I think during that Super Bowl, I saw you run away from someone, take one to the house. And he was not one of those, fast guys.
But 2009 brought a new test. Could he keep that magic alive when every defensive coordinator in the league had one game plan: stop number 11? And the answer? Well, they could scheme all they wanted. But stopping Larry Fitzgerald? Yeah, good luck with that. That season, Fitzgerald was unrelenting. He hauled in 97 catches for 1,092 yards and led the entire NFL with 13 touchdowns. And when the postseason rolled around, he reminded everyone that January belonged to him. In the wild card round against the Packers, Fitzgerald scored 2 third-quarter touchdowns in a 51-45 overtime classic. And even though the Cardinals' run ended a week later against the eventual Super Bowl champion Saints, nobody questioned Fitzgerald's place as the NFL's ultimate big-game receiver. But in 2010, everything changed. Kurt Warner, the Hall of Fame quarterback who had elevated Arizona into a contender, retired. Suddenly, Fitzgerald went from catching dimes from a legend to scraping by with Derek Anderson, Max Hall, and rookie John Skelton. For most receivers, that kind of quarterback carousel would have been a death sentence. But Fitzgerald was built differently. Even in total chaos, he still posted 90 receptions, 1,137 yards, and 6 touchdowns.
Yep.
Following that, Fitzgerald signed an 8-year, $120 million contract, one of the richest in NFL history for a non-quarterback at the time. And he lived up to every penny. He put up 80 receptions, 1,411 yards, and 8 touchdowns, slicing through defenses with circus grabs that made even bad passes look brilliant. He averaged a career best 17.6 yards per catch, routinely taking over games, even when defenses knew exactly where the ball was going. But the next season tested his patience like never before. The 2012 Cardinals cycled through 4 different quarterbacks. The offense was lifeless, finishing near dead last in every category. Yet, Fitzgerald still managed 71 catches, 798 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, those are numbers that don't jump off the page, but when you consider the circumstances, they might have been his most impressive. He was double-teamed on nearly every snap, often catching balls that barely got to him, and things just continued to spiral out of control for Arizona. Then, in 2015, Larry was moved from being an outside receiver to being in the slot more.
I got way smarter because I looked at it initially as a demotion, and I took it the wrong way. But if anything, it was a promotion because I could still play outside, but I didn't really have the nuances and the ability to play inside when I first moved in there. And then after a year or two, I still had the same skill set to go play outside, but now I just added something to my bag. And so I became a better player. I became more difficult to guard because now I could do this and I could do that. So I think it just me develop into, a better, more efficient player.
There, he became a possession monster, posting a career-high 109 receptions, 1,215 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He hit milestone after milestone, becoming the youngest player in NFL history to record 1,000 career catches. The Cardinals finished with a 13-3 record and an NFC West title. And when the playoffs rolled around, you already know who showed up. In the divisional round against the Green Bay Packers, after a final second Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary sent the game into overtime, the Cardinals found themselves with the ball and the chance to end the game. Carson Palmer rolled right and found Fitzgerald on a short dump-off. What happened next was pure legend. Fitzgerald zigzagged across the field, breaking tackles, stiff-arming defenders, and sprinting 75 yards into Packers territory as the stadium shook. 2 plays later, he caught the game-winning touchdown. Unfortunately, just a week later against the Panthers, the magic ran out. Palmer turned the ball over 6 times, and the offense completely unraveled, and Arizona was crushed 49-15. But by 2016, it was clear. Larry Fitzgerald was already an all-time great. Nearly every receiver taken in that 2004 draft class had long since faded into retirement. But Fitzgerald, he was still the heartbeat of the Arizona Cardinals. At 33 years old, he was still leading the entire NFL in receptions with 107 catches, becoming the oldest player in league history to ever do it. He was too smart, too disciplined, and too polished for age to slow him down. That season also saw him reach a milestone only 12 players had ever touched before: 100 career touchdowns. And 2017 only added to the legend. With Steve Smith and Anquan Boldin hanging it up, Fitzgerald became the elder statesman of NFL receivers. Yet, you'd never know it by watching him. On a Monday night stage against Dallas, he put up 13 catches for 149 yards and a score, tying his career high in receptions. A few weeks later, he caught a sudden death overtime touchdown to beat the 49ers. By 2018, the Cardinals were collapsing around him. Injuries, a rookie quarterback in Josh Rosen, and a 3-13 season meant dark times in the desert. But through it all, Fitz remained the Rock. And while he really had no reason to be, he remained loyal.
I knew that if I had gone from city to city chasing the ring, that in all likelihood I would never be able to have the same level of relationships and depth of quality of relationships that I will be able to have in the same city for that period of time.
That was also the year he passed Terrell Owens for second all-time in career receiving yards, trailing only Jerry Rice. 2020 would be his final act. At 37 years old, Fitz battled through COVID and Father Time. But the resume he left behind was wild. 1,432 career receptions, second only to Jerry Rice, 17,492 receiving yards, also second all-time, and 121 touchdowns. A career that spanned nearly 2 decades without a single season under 50 catches. But here's the stat that feels more myth than reality. Out of those 1,432 receptions, Fitzgerald was officially credited with just 29 drops. That means he had more career tackles at 41 than he did drops. No receiver in history matched that level of trust, and his Cardinals records are nearly untouchable. Most receptions, most receiving yards, most touchdowns, most playoff catches, most 100-yard games. He was the Arizona Cardinals. So where does Larry Fitzgerald rank among the all-time greats? He may not have the 3 rings of Jerry Rice, the highlight reel swagger of Randy Moss, or the wild energy of Terrell Owens. But here's the difference. Larry did all of this while catching passes from 21 different quarterbacks. And yet he still climbed to second all-time in receptions and receiving yards. Whether or not he's the greatest receiver to ever play will always spark arguments. But when it comes to who has the best hands in NFL history, there is no debate. It's Larry Legend. If you enjoyed this video, stick with Blitz. Subscribe and check out some of our other content right here.
Yeah, if you're new to the channel, man, subscribe, man, like it, and comment, man. How y'all feel about this video, man? I want to hear y'all opinion, man. I see y'all next video.